Hello and welcome to another version of Thulin Takeover Thursday. I'm just going to jump right into it, and it's March Madness right now, and it's the best time of the year in my eyes and a lot of people's eyes who follow college basketball. But I'm going to try to delve into something that not many people, I think will do when talking about March Madness. There'll be a lot of projections, and we'll get to that on the College Sports Hive. But I'm going to try to tell you what makes each of these teams, or at least a large portion of the teams remaining in the Sweet 16, successful, and talk about what they've done in the matchups that they've had, and how that's made them successful enough to be in the Sweet 16 in a year where there is the most upsets there's ever been, in a year where the average seed in the Sweet 16 is nearly a 6 seed. That is inflated by Oral Roberts being a 15, but still, even without them, it is still a far higher seed. For reference, 2019, the average seed was just above a 3 seed. And so you're seeing a bunch of upsets. You're seeing a bunch of great basketball. And I just want to diagnose what's making these teams successful. So first and foremost, I think the most impressive display of coaching or tactical brilliance at this point was Loyola Chicago's win over Illinois. I think that was kind of the game where people said, wow, this team's for real, because they beat a team that most people had going to the Final Four, or at least the Elite Eight. Not many people didn't have them going that far because Illinois was playing great basketball. And don't get it twisted, Illinois is a great basketball team. They just happened to run into a team that was equally adept and has unique ability from the 5 spot. So I'll break down what I think makes them successful and talk about certain points in that Illinois game that were advantageous for Loyola Chicago. So Loyola Chicago was number 1 defensively all year. So that should come as no shock, but I'll tell you what they do. What they do is use a drop coverage, which means they drop Cameron Krutwig, their big guy, who's a nimble. He doesn't look like an athletic specimen by any means, but he's nimble. He knows where to be, and he's a loud, commanding presence in the back. And the guards who are defending know where he is and know how to funnel to him. They also shifted some of their philosophies to take away the attacking capabilities of the uber talented Illinois guards in Ayo Dosunmu and Andre Curbelo, and blitzed a lot of ball screens. But what I found to be most important is when the ball went into Kofi Cockburn, when he dove to the rim, because there weren't too many pick and rolls, but there were a lot of times where he'd slip a screen and they'd try to throw a high-low or throw the ball inside to him. They doubled down, made his life really hard, so he didn't have very many clear looks as a physical specimen that he is. And he's not very adept at putting the ball on the floor, making moves with doubles and with pesky guards around. He usually takes advantage of solo coverage and makes simple reads. So they did a great job of taking away both penetration from Ayo Dosunmu and Andre Curbelo off of ball streams, as well as the dump off by sagging in. So what is left susceptible? To me, that would be 3-point shooting. And the guys who shot those had an off night. And I think a lot of credit should go to Loyola Chicago, but you could also point to Illinois and say they're shooting, they have to make the shots, and they didn't. So the one that stood out to me was Frazier. Trent Frazier shot 36% on the year from 3, and he only made 1 shot. He went 1 of 10 in the game, which is anomalous. But credit to Loyola Chicago gapping up defensively, clogging up lanes. They blitzed a lot of screens, making life hard for Andre Curbelo and Ayo Dosunmu, who couldn't get those kickouts to Trent Frazier, make them as clean of looks. Other guys like Trent Frazier, who had Adam Miller actually had a pretty decent day. He went 2 of 4 from 3, but that's a freshman. You don't want him taking as many shots. You've got Jacob Grandison made a 3, but he only had 3 points. DeMonte Williams only had 2 points. Trent Frazier only 2 points. That's 7 points out of 3 guys who played big minutes. And that, I think that a great amount of credit to that is to the defensive staff of Porter Moser and company, where they play a slower pace. They didn't let Illinois get into transition. They gapped up. They doubled down on Kofi. They blitzed a few screens. They alternated coverages. And in gapping up, they made you shoot threes from the perimeter. And if you're cold, you're cold. That happens. And oftentimes Illinois was able to find remedies to that, because that's happened during the year. But this was not one of those days, and Loyola Chicago looked like the superior team on that end of the floor. And then offensively, they didn't score a ton. They scored 71 points, which is, a normal number, I'd say. But what they did was so impressive due to their pace. What they did is they have a unique talent in Cameron Krutwig who can pass. He's the best 5-man passer in the nation. What he did is he took the ball and they ran what I like to call a scissor cut action or a peel cut, where Cameron Krutwig has the ball at the top. And it's similar to Nikola Jokic, where he's kind of surveying the floor and the cuts happen around him. So one play that repeatedly happened was that Kofi Coburn, who Illinois deploys in a drop coverage similar to the way that Loyola Chicago drops Cameron Krutwig. What happens is when he drops, they pitch it back to the guy coming over the top of Cameron Krutwig and it's like a dribble handoff almost from this 5-man. And in doing so, that allows a mid-range jump shot, a floater, or maybe a drive and kick, drive and dish. And they got that action a ton. So Illinois adjusted to that. And you saw Krutwig then go have some isolations, or he would hit a back door where they'd fake the over the top, and then they'd throw it to the other guy exchanging places, who would often slip like the exchange and get a wide open shot on the baseline. And Illinois didn't really know how to adjust to this. You saw a few instances of them trying to do stuff differently, and then Loyola Chicago had answers. It was a masterpiece tactically from Porter Moser and company. And I'll say this now, I think Porter Moser would be wise to stay at Loyola Chicago. He's building an awesome program. But what I will say is that he will be paid. He will be paid a lot of money to leave. And one place that prides themselves on good basketball, it's the place of the NCAA tournament. Won't be too hard for him to get a meeting. Is the Indiana Hoosiers should certainly look at Porter Moser as a potential head coach candidate, and that would put Indiana back on the map. So another team that stood out to me, I'm not going to go through all 16 that are remaining, but I will tell you about things that stand out. I think that'll be the most in-depth on X's and O's, but I'll talk about Baylor. Baylor's impressed me all year, as you know, if you've listened to the College Sports Hive. But what impresses me so much about them is not how their offense is really good, not how they have 3 guards who can score, even though that is super flashy and fun. They've got Matthew Meyer with a mullet, Mark Vidal's small ball. It's to me their defense. Defensively, Baylor plays a no-middle defense. They ice ball screens often and keep you out of the middle, and they have extremely fleet-footed guards on the defensive end. Not only can they attack the paint on the offensive end, but defensively they're extremely quick laterally. And for those of you who know basketball pretty well, Baylor for a while was known as a zone team, and they were very efficient at doing so. They had a big centers such as Isaiah Austin, such as Jonathan Motley. You get a lot of guys that deter you from the lane. You had Corey Jefferson, Perry Jones, Royce O'Neal's, Torian Prince's, Ish Wainwright's, King McClure. A lot of guys that are super long and in the mold of like a 6'7", 6'8" wings that you don't want to go enter the paint in. But one day, Daveon Mitchell, who in my opinion is the best defender in the country, and I'll get to him in a little bit, Daveon Mitchell has a manner of leading, and I think, and this is one of the sneakiest things. What makes Baylor so good is because of a meeting that happened behind closed doors that I saw reported. So Daveon Mitchell came to Scott Drew before the 2019-2020 season, so a year ago, and he's before last season, 2 years ago, and he said Baylor shouldn't play the zone they'd been playing for years, and that takes some guts. Scott Drew's a great coach, and I'm sure he recognized it, but Daveon Mitchell said, this zone is great for players that have long wingspans that are really athletic and they take up a lot of space. But our trio of guards, himself, Daveon Mitchell 6'2", Jared Butler 6'3", and Macy Ortiga 6'4", they don't fit that mold. And so they can't take away the space. But what they can do is they can slide their feet. So instead, they switch to icing ball screens, taking away the middle. And then when they switch, they play guys like Mark Vidal and Matthew Meyer, who can switch and slide on no matter what position. And Baylor keeps you out of the paint, makes you shoot contested jump shots. If you get to the paint, they double down. They strip the ball beautifully from Wisconsin bigs. And they make life very tough for you. And then they couple that with a great defensive supplement of being great offensively. So that's a little tactician. I'll get to Daveon Mitchell. I hinted at this. I didn't mention this at the open because I was so excited to talk about Loyola Chicago and Cameron Krutwig. But I'm going to talk to you guys about who I think are the best draft prospects still remaining in the tournament. So from the Sweet 16 teams, I'll talk to you guys about who are the best NBA draft prospects and some stats and some analysis on my part. So that'll be to come. And I've got a few more teams I want to get through on the Sweet 16 that I think do an excellent job schematically and what makes them successful not only in the regular season, but especially the tournament. And with that segue, let's talk about Syracuse. This is a team that the last few years, I mean, it's a rich basketball program under Jim Boeheim, but the last few years, they've been better in the postseason, dramatically better in the postseason than they have been in the regular season. And I think a part of that is just the ability to adapt of the ACC coaches. You see a lot of really good teams in the ACC, Virginia, Duke, North Carolina, Florida State, teams that would be hard to beat anyway. But also I think it's just being accustomed to facing Syracuse, which in the ACC, so their zone and their offensive firepower are a little bit negated, and they still, end up 9-7 in the ACC. That's 8th though. And to be 8th in a conference and be in the Sweet 16, and this is not the first time. They made the Final Four as a 10 seed in 2016. They made the Sweet 16 in 2018, and now they're in the Sweet 16 and in great position to go further, playing their best basketball of the year. So what makes their zone so difficult to prepare for? That's a question that I think a lot of coaches will say, like, oh man, we got Syracuse and we got 2 days now to scout them out. And I don't think that's a task a lot of coaches would like to have. So Syracuse, they play a 2-3 zone. But I read an article saying that the coaches in the ACC who see it the most often do not think it's a 2-3 zone. It's more of a 4-1 zone. They play one guy dropping back deep, and they play the wings super high. They can trap if the ball goes to the short corner. And what makes them so different from a standard 2-3 zone? Because lots of teams in the country employ 2-3 zones, but Syracuse always uses it and always provides problems in the tournament. Well, for starters, they play big guards and big wings. I mean, some of the guys you can think of Hakeem Warwick. You can think of Jeremy Grant, C.J. Fair, similar to Baylor, except even bigger. James Sutherland. So players like that come to mind. So they play a 2-3 zone where when you're taught to break a zone, you're taught to bring the ball to the middle. But they basically man up from the middle. And a guy that in Merrick Dolezaj is who is the center most often in the 2-3 zone for Syracuse this year. He's played that zone for so long. He knows the intricacies. He knows the scouting report. We saw West Virginia in the last round. Bob Huggins was in the Big East with Syracuse and Jim Boeheim for years, and he still struggled early. And they initially put Derek Culver and Gabe Osaboyan in the middle of the zone, and Dolezaj would drop back, and then the guards would pick down and make it hard for any ball movement. So then you put a guard in there, and the length overwhelms them, and they play up, making you pass out of there. You've seen teams like Virginia has been great at beating the zone because they have guys like Ty Jerome, who's a taller guard who can shoot. He can make moves out of there and is not rushed. But teams without preparation really struggle against them. One thing that I think makes Syracuse better in the postseason this year specifically is they've gotten bigger. Not only do they have their long wings already, but they play Kadari Richmond up top more frequently than Joseph Girard, who is about 6'3", and Kadari Richmond is about 6'6", super athletic. They've also got Jesse Edwards playing center, a lot of center minutes, and moving Merrick Dolezaj to the wing. And now you've got a 6'9" center who can really slide his feet, coupled with a 7-footer protecting the rim. And you can kind of think of Rakeem Christmas, if those of you who have watched enough Syracuse basketball, you know how dangerous he was as a rim protector. So long story short, Syracuse is impossible to prepare for because on 2 days' notice, you're not used to. You can't replicate the length they have. You can't replicate the random traps. Most zones, you got to be patient to beat, and teams like Virginia thrive on this. But a lot of teams don't have the preparation of being an ACC team to play them, and they're not used to a zone forcing you to move the ball quickly and force turnovers. The way to beat zones you hear is shoot 3-pointers, and that's what college basketball is coming to, what the NBA has come to, is shooting a lot of threes. But why does Syracuse not give up a good 3-point percentage? That's because they force you to shoot bad 3-pointers, and their length can test them, bothers shots. You get too in the habit of shooting them. And I think we saw that with San Diego State, even. Like you had Jordan Shackle and Matt Mitchell launching up some bad shots, and it was too late to come back from. They were down 20 basically. So that's Syracuse. I'll be super intrigued to see what happens when they play Houston, who likes to shoot a lot of threes, and they rebound the ball very well, which are two perceived weaknesses of the zone. So with that said, I'll talk about Houston. This will be very brief. Houston is under Kelvin Sampson, a really, really good tactician, an X's and O's coach who motivates his players, has a track record of winning wherever he goes. One thing I'll say about Houston is they crash the glass at a ridiculous rate. You watch them play Rutgers, they make a late comeback. They're down 10 and they end up winning that game. How many times did you see Rutgers box out with bigger players and Houston crash the glass with 4 players and leave one unaccounted for? Quentin Grimes tips the ball up in the air. Dejan Jarreau tips one up in the air. Marcus Sasser gets the ball in the air and they score. And extra possessions equate to more points. So Syracuse in a 2-3 zone isn't man on man. They don't know who to box out against, who to account for. So this is something that you should watch for in that matchup. Another thing that Houston does really well is they shoot a lot of threes and they have a pretty good accuracy on the season. So I said I'd be brief on that. That's basically all I'll say about Houston. But because the 2 perceived weaknesses of a 2-3 zone, or any zone for that matter, are rebounding and giving up good looks from 3, that should be an interesting matchup to see whose unique attributes wins out there. So another team that's very, very hot in this tournament that I don't think many people saw coming, that's a double-digit seed and also wears orange, is Oregon State. Oregon State was picked 12th in the Pac-12 in the preseason. Wayne Tinkle guaranteed you they wouldn't be 12th. He was right. They were 5th. They won the Pac-12 tournament, got themselves a bid, beat Tennessee, beat Oklahoma State, and they have a chance. They play Loyola Chicago. They're not playing Illinois. They're playing an 8 seed as a 12 seed in the Sweet 16. That's all you can ask for. And you know what? What I think makes not Loyola Chicago, but I mean them too. What I think makes Oregon State so excellent in this postseason is they're like, we are playing free and we believe. If you believe and it's a 1-game setting, you can win. It doesn't hurt that they shot 32 of 35 from the free throw line against Oklahoma State, and they also won the rebounding war 52-32. So those are pretty ridiculous stats. I don't think you'll shoot 32 of 35 again, and I don't think you're going to win the rebounding war by 20 too often. You're definitely going to win those games when you do that, though, even against a super talented team led by Cade Cunningham in Oklahoma State. But what I will say that is repeatable is they're shooting the ball with confidence. They're getting great looks. They're having players like Jared Lucas, Kalu, Roman Silva's keeping extra balls alive. Alatishe is a great athlete who provides a dump-off threat, who can dribble a little bit and can be in force on the interior. Ethan Thompson's been there a long time. What Oregon State is doing is they're moving the ball and getting great looks. A lot of teams in the tournament have been overwhelmed by size, athleticism, pace. Oregon State has not shied away. They had a lot of turnovers due to the athleticism of Oklahoma State pressing when desperate, but when they were in the half court, when they got there, they got the best look. Some of the shot quality was probably some of the best in the entire tournament that I've seen. Speaking of shot quality and great pace and just unbelievable offense, we got to mention Gonzaga. So Gonzaga's been great all along, but I'll talk about some things I've noticed from the tournament that they've played. They played a pretty tough game against Oklahoma. They also beat Norfolk State, but I'll talk about the Oklahoma game, something I mentioned that I noticed, and I'll mention this here. So Gonzaga's been great offensively all year, but what's elevated them offensively this year from years past, to me, that is the athleticism all around on their roster that they've lacked years past. They've had Brandon Clark. They've had Rui Hachimura recently. But what's different is they have an elite athlete in the backcourt. You've had players like Nigel Williams-Goss, players that make NBA teams, but this year they've got a one-and-done in Jalen Suggs, who, again, I'll talk about once we get to the prospects. But in Jalen Suggs, you have a guy who can push the pace, be dynamic, be athletic, also shoot the ball. They've got a great shooter. They've got great post play. So in the half court, they can score. But when they push the pace, their efficiency is unbelievable. They spot up. They run the floor. Joel Ayayi and Jalen Suggs are amazing athletes, and they know how to pass the ball. A lot of teams have an amazing athlete, and he pushes it, and sometimes athleticism wins out. But what Gonzaga does is they have a systematic attack. When they attack downhill, you've got players filling lanes, you got players spacing out, and then you also have those superior athletes attacking. And I think that made a big difference. When they got stops against Oklahoma, it was like Oklahoma had to score the next possession. And if you got 2 in a row, the game was extended. And Oklahoma started great. I think Oklahoma played one of the best games that I've seen them play this year, and I watched plenty of Oklahoma. And they just didn't seem to have a chance because of how good Gonzaga is offensively. And Gonzaga's best defense is their offense, because when they get a stop, they almost always score in transition. They play fast. They get great looks. And if they don't score, you're like, wow, Corey Kissberg missed an open three. That's impossible. Drew Timme in the post decides, hey, I'm going to play another Power 5 school, and I'm going to score 28 points with a few drop steps, a few head fakes, super skilled player. This is a team that I think is on a collision course with Baylor, and I really hope to see that matchup. But offensively, you're seeing Mark Few's principles of ball movement, a lot of flex screens, getting players open, turning into a more modern attack with pace and pick and roll play. And then you've got elite shooters like he's had in years past, coupled with elite athletes. So those are some of the teams that I wanted to break down, talk about what they do as a team, as a unit, schematically, to make the Sweet 16, to see if they can extend some runs. I know I missed some teams. I think Michigan does an awesome job. I just want to give a shout out to them. Juwan Howard did an amazing job coaching them this year. But one thing that stood out to me is their off-ball movement. When the ball gets into Hunter Dickinson, they run their players off flex screens. They run Eli Brooks attacks the rim right off the bounce. Franz Wagner's excellent at that as well. And they also think of creative ways to get the ball into the middle. So I've talked about a lot of teams. Some of the teams I've already talked about on the year, with Florida State switching. That'll be an interesting matchup between Florida State and Michigan. They switch everything. They're super athletic. They go 12 deep on the bench. But I think that's enough of talking about schematics. I'm going to excite you with one-on-one players. So we'll be back in just a moment and talking about who I think are the best prospects remaining in the NCAA tournament on the 16 teams left in the Sweet 16. Alrighty, so let's talk about the prospects in the 2021 NBA draft. There are a lot of prospects left on some of these teams. You'll see I'll leave a few off, but I want to, for the sake of time, I'll give you around 10 prospects still left that I think will be first-round picks. And first-round picks is still in the tournament. To have 10 is pretty impressive, and I really think all of these guys I'll talk about will be first-round picks. So I'll start with the top. I think this guy has an argument to be number one, but I think he will be number two, and I'd be pretty surprised if he does not go number two. And that is Evan Mobley of USC. Evan Mobley's a freshman. He took the home in the Pac-12 Freshman Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and Player of the Year, and he dominated Kansas, a team who is a blue blood. They're often in the Sweet 16s, but he and USC dominated Kansas. Let me talk about what Evan Mobley does. Aside from score 16.5 points, 8.8 rebounds on a pretty egalitarian offense where he doesn't get that many looks. Like, he's their best player by miles, but he's not force-fed the ball. And that was the same with Onyeka Okongwu last year at USC. But Evan Mobley, what makes him special is his elite defensive ability. He slides his feet on the perimeter. He erases shots at the rim. And he's able to impact the game from wherever on the court defensively. He can switch defensively. He can play drop coverage. He can block shots as a help defender. He can block shots as a primary defender. And it doesn't hurt that offensively he can be a pick and pop threat. Like, here's a quote. He's got elite pick and roll potential. He can pop for jumpers, attack off the dribble, pick apart defenses out of the short roll, make hook shots with either hand, dribble to the rim, or throw down lobs. You don't see that as many centers. Like, centers that have that ability are so rare and are all NBA talents. I think one that comes to mind in terms of defensive versatility is Bam Adebayo, who's now, a very rich man who's got $195 million in his pocket just for being versatile defensively. And Evan Mobley is bigger and I think has a better jump shot at this same stage. So if that speaks to all NBA potential, I think Evan Mobley is the best prospect in the NCAA March Madness tournament that is still remaining. I was hoping Cade Cunningham would be on here still. I think he will be the number one pick. I'll just give a brief summary about him and go to those still playing. Cade Cunningham just has excellent vision, excellent size, and his shot was one of my main concerns coming into the year. And he shot 86% from the free throw line and about 41% from three. And that spelled all worries of his shooting ability, and his defensive and leadership is off the charts as well. So another freshman that's been grabbing headlines all year and will continue to do so and will be a top 5 pick in the draft as well is Jalen Suggs. Jalen Suggs has athleticism, shooting, passing, and he's a point guard. You don't see that coupled attributes that often in a point guard. He's 6'4". He's very strong. He's built to absorb contact at the rim. He crashes boards. He can even be a weak side shot blocker. I think he could be a special defensive player, as well as having the ability to attack the rim, to shoot when teams go under. One of his most impressive performances, was against Iowa, where he hit 7 threes, I think, and Iowa was consistently going under screens, and Jalen Suggs was hitting from 2 or 3 feet beyond the college three-point line, a few times well beyond the NBA three-point line, and he was hitting all these shots and didn't seem to even show off his best attributes of getting into passing lanes and scoring in the open floor, as he did so many times throughout the seasons. You don't see many players with that type of athleticism, so polished, so used to playing in an NBA pace, which Gonzaga does. They play extremely quickly with so many players that will be NBA players. So he's not like Cade Cunningham in the sense that Cade was by far and away the best player on his roster. Most players would say that teams and coaches would probably say that Corey Kissberg was the best player on Gonzaga's roster. In fact, he won WCC Player of the Year. So one of the appealing attributes with Jalen Suggs is that he's played with talent and he knows how to play with other players. And he also still put up the numbers: 14 points, 5 rebounds, over 5 rebounds, over 4 assists, 2 steals per game, under a block, but he made highlight blocks from the point guard spot, gets into passing lanes. He can lock your defender up. And in big moments against BYU, they were down in the WCC championship game, and Jalen Suggs put that game away. And he said, "Don't worry about this. I'm built for this. I'm going to score." And that's what he did. In close games, he came to play. So I'm really high on Jalen Suggs, and I think a top 5 pick, and he'll be an interesting one to monitor to see if he goes 3 through 5, because there's some G League players that are excellent as well. The next guy for me, I'm a little higher on this guy than I think a lot of people are on drafts, but that's Scottie Barnes. He goes to Florida State. Leonard Hamilton, he's a prototype for Leonard Hamilton. He is long, strong, athletic, will press, will pass, and will do whatever you will ask of him. And that's what's so appealing about him as an NBA prospect. First off, Scottie Barnes averages a little over 10 per game, 4 rebounds, 4.1 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 1.5 steals. And the most appealing thing to me about Scottie Barnes is that he can legitimately defend 1 through 5, and he plays point guard. He is a true, I wouldn't say he's a true point guard, but he's closer to a true point guard than someone just like emulating a point guard out of necessity. You see that from some teams at times where they're like, hey, we'll put a 2 guard at our point guard and see how this works. And he is far closer to being a true point guard at 6'9", 230 than you can dream of for most instances. He's compared often to guys like Draymond Green, and he's got the defensive tools of Draymond Green, OG Anunoby, and he's got the smarts and the feel for the game that you associate with Draymond Green, but you could say he's a better athlete. And I think even Draymond would agree he's a better athlete. I'm not saying he will be Draymond Green, but don't be surprised if years from now you're like perennial all defensive player, a couple time defensive player of the year. And in fact, I've got another quote here. So I'll give you a full breakdown. I think this is from The Ringer. Incredible physical profile with long arms and a huge bulky frame mixed with quickness. Most importantly, he plays with a relentless defensive mindset. At worst, he'll be a good defender. At best, he will win defensive accolades throughout his entire career. So like I said, you can plug him in and he'll be a plus NBA defender right away as an 18-year-old. At best, you're going to get an all NBA guy, defensively at least. One other thing is, like Florida State players, this is hard to evaluate based off stats. You're going to see, only 10 points a game. Like, I wish he asserted himself more. No, Florida State plays 12 players deep. They play a lot of guys. The number 4 pick in this year's draft, who's played very well, Patrick Williams, came off the bench. Scottie Barnes has played half of his games or more off the bench for Florida State and has embraced that role. That's something that I think would be something that coaches like, NBA coaches like, that, hey, he embraced his role as a 5-star freshman coming in, came into Leonard Hamilton's team, made them better, and was able to embrace a role where he's not necessarily the star. That's appealing to me. as a GM and as an NBA coach. Florida State used him all over defensively, guarding lead ball handlers, battling against post bigs, and playing the back line of a zone when they play, and he fulfilled a rim protection role. That's something you can't really teach. To me, he's one of our unique prospects. I've actually got him ranked 6th on my board. The Ringer and Tankathon, two sites I like looking at, have him lower than that. But don't be surprised if he goes up there in the top 10, and watch out for the Seminoles as the tournament progresses, because he can be a huge difference battling against Hunter Dickinson as well as Mike Smith, which is a 14-inch difference. Mike Smith is about 5'10", Hunter Dickinson is about 7'7", and he will be guarding both. Next up, speaking of another team that will have its hands full with good scores and smaller guards, that's Moses Moody in Arkansas playing Oral Roberts and Max Asmus. I'm going to talk about Moses Moody though. The greatest thing about Moses Moody in my eyes is his ability to score in many facets. He scores 17.4 points per game. He's 38% from three, gets around 6 rebounds, and is about 82% from the line. Those are awesome college numbers. They play a super upbeat style, but they're under Eric Musselman. They're also a very egalitarian offense. And in being egalitarian, Moses Moody hasn't forced shots. You see him scoring as a off-ball player. He's been able to use his physical dimensions as a bigger guy who's 6'8", about 200 pounds, who really is able to use his body to score. He's able to drive. He's able to shoot the three, does so in multiple facets. And he's a guy I had below Brandon Boston, below Zaire Williams, and some other guys in this class that I've seen him play. And his college ability on the college floor has convinced me to take him and believe in his upside, even though I think that the other guys may have more athletic ability. He's got game. So a little quote about him is: excellent physical dimensions, uses strong frame and long arms to alter shots as a help defender near the rim or harass opponents man-to-man on the perimeter. Good stationary shooter, but needs to speed up his release off threes, off screens, and handoffs. So what you're seeing there is he can score 17 a game, and the first thing they talk about is his excellent defense. And that's just something to me that you've seen me harp on other guys is sometimes what's important is being well-rounded and playing well in games. And that's what he did. That's what Evan Mobley's done. They show versatility and just something that you want on both ends of the floor, because if some days your shot's not falling, make an impact on the defensive end. And some days you're not defending as well, you score really well. And I love how well-rounded he is. He's improved every time I've watched him throughout the season, and he's spearheaded a run to the Sweet 16, maybe further for the Razorbacks. But also they won 12 out of 13 games to close the season. So kudos to Eric Musselman and Arkansas, and certainly Moses Moody. And that's a guy I would also look for around 8 through 10 on my NBA draft board as a mock draft. Here's a guy that is not a one and done, didn't attend Montverde like Moses Moody, like Scottie Barnes, like Cade Cunningham. He is on the number one team in the nation, though, and that is Corey Kissberg. I talked about him earlier as the WCC Player of the Year. Corey Kissberg scored 19.2 points per game with a 69% true shooting percentage, 44% from three. And you think he's a one-trick pony. Oh, he played in the WCC, he doesn't defend anyone. Well, Gonzaga plays a ridiculously difficult non-conference season, and he showed that he was able to defend. He showed he was able to be athletic enough to score in multiple ways when he was clearly up high on the scouting report. He's athletic to play the NBA game. He's got a beautiful shot. He moves off the ball extremely well. And one of the things the scouting reports I read said he's got potentially a 50-40-90 player. What that means is that he is shooting 50% from the field, 40% from three, and 90% from the free throw line. That is extremely rare company. You see guys like Larry Bird, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant in there. So that is the ultimate compliment. I'm not saying he'll be as good as those players, but it talks to his shooting ability, and his capacity to play defense in a 3-and-D league makes him a very appealing pick. I think he'll be somewhere between 9 through 15 in the draft. A comparison I've got for him is Joe Harris. I think a lot of people will be like, oh, that's cliche because he's a white shooter who can really shoot. But what you don't know about Joe Harris is at Virginia, he played a Tony Bennett system that Klay Thompson also played at Washington State. His coach was Tony Bennett. And he adapted. He was a star player in college and has adapted beautifully to playing with stars. And that is something I think Kissberg will be able to do because he's playing with Jalen Suggs. He's playing with Joel IE, who is another guy I'll get to. He's playing with Drew Timme, and he understands what it is to supplement big players, make his shots, play defense, play his role, and I think that's very important. Another guy who's playing his role is not leading his team in scoring. He's not second on the team in scoring. He's third in the team in scoring, but he's certainly their most valuable player. That is Franz Wagner of Michigan, younger brother of Mo Wagner. He scored 12.8 points per game, shot 38% from three. Defensively, he is phenomenal. He's a 6'9" two guard, basically. He can play 2 through 4. He's got an ability to shoot the ball. He's got the ability to slash. He can play pick and roll facilitator. He can be a roll guy and pass out of it. What I love about Franz is exactly that. It's his versatility. So here's some talk from, I think this is the Ringer again. In some systems, he could be a major threat facilitating from the elbow areas, running dribble handoffs with shooters or serve as the ball handler or screener in the pick and roll. Again, that's talking about his versatility. They continue to say he's a computer brain on defense, reads plays instantly and disrupts actions by beating opponents to their spots. He will make a significant impact as an off-ball defender, reliable on-ball defender who's stout against players his size with lateral quickness to switch screens onto some smaller players. So he can play bigger. We talked about this with Scottie Barnes. He's not quite the defender Scottie Barnes is, but he is very good, and his intelligence shows on tape. Like, you watch him defend players in the Big Ten tournament. I've watched him defend Trendon Watford in the NCAA tournament. Trendon Watford's going to be picked somewhere, and he is elite that way. And to me, his biggest knock is shooting ability, and he's shooting 38%. You talk about productivity, you talk about playing on a good team, understanding the role. Franz Wagner fits all those boxes for me, and I think he'll be in the lottery as well. I think he'll be 10 to 14. So that's an awesome one. Now we've talked about some bigger guys that are playing a lot of roles. This is a guy who was a first-team All-American, as was Corey Kissberg for – I didn't mention that accolade, but here's another first-team All-American, and that's Jared Butler of Baylor. He scored 17 points per game, 41% from three, nearly 5 assists per game, a little over 3 boards per game, and 2 steals. What those stats say in and of themselves is he's an accomplished scorer and a very good defender, both on ball and off ball. We talked about Baylor's ability to defend. That is all spearheaded by the guards sliding their feet, and he is one of those guards who plays huge minutes for them. He gets 2 steals, nearly 5 assists, scores 41% from three, goes inside, outside. He's their best pure scorer, and he's their leader of their team, who has as good a shot as anyone to win the national title. So that is a huge case right there. But another thing for me to talk about is he's improved every year. He could have gone to the draft last year and probably been a borderline first-round pick. Now this year, he's being evaluated as a guy who can go top 15 in the draft. I'm not sure I'd take him top 15 just because I think there are some players with some higher upside, but what you will get is someone who's very productive, someone who can defend already at the NBA level, and someone who can shoot already at the NBA level, shooting over 40% from three, and many of his shots come off the dribble. He's also got great on-ball skills as a passer with one of the best handles in the nation. So I think you get a guy who's consistent. And it depends. If you're looking for a plug-and-play guy, he's right there. If you want long-term potential, you might go with a guy like Sharif Cooper as a guard instead, who's an amazing facilitator but needs to work on shooting, but he's a bit younger. So with that said, I'm going to kind of group these two together. I'm going to talk about Daveon Mitchell, who is one of my favorite prospects, if not my favorite prospect in the NBA draft. And my favorite thing about Daveon Mitchell is he's improved every single season. Not only is he a leader, I talked about him talking to Scott Drew, making them play this defense of no middle defense, icing the ball screens. Daveon Mitchell is the best on-ball defender in the country. He might win the Defensive Player of the Year spot from a point guard position, but also he's improved in every aspect, not only defensively, not only leading, but he's also now shooting 46% from three. For those of you who've watched a lot of Daveon Mitchell, you didn't think that was possible watching him initially. He's scoring 15.5 points per game, 6 assists per game, and defends the best player every night. And he also doesn't have the ball in his hands all that often because you got Jared Butler and Maceo Teague. He'll accept a role off ball. Personally, I'm a Utah Jazz fan, And I've been saying all year I would kill to pick Daveon Mitchell and couple Donovan Mitchell with Daveon Mitchell. I think that would be an awesome backcourt. Not only do they both have similar names, not only do they both wear number 45, but I think their game styles really complement one another with a defensively oriented Daveon helping someone who can already score at an elite level in Donovan. So that's my pitch right there. Please pick him, the Jazz. And fun fact for those of you who are not Jazz fans, Dennis Lindsey had a son who played for Baylor a couple years before Daveon. So I'm sure he's watched plenty of Daveon Mitchell. So that is a very, very real possibility. I do have one concern, though, and that's his free throw shooting is only about 67%. And for a guy who shoots 46% from three, you don't know exactly what's the truer side of his shooting ability. But that said, I would highly consider Daveon Mitchell for the Jazz if he's available. I probably wouldn't expect him to be available after this postseason run, though. Another guy that I would consider for the Utah Jazz is someone from West Coast that I'm sure the Jazz have seen plenty of as he's torched Utah a few times. That's Chris Duarte of Oregon. Chris Duarte kind of came in last year and was like, oh, who's this guy who's shooting, supplementing off of Peyton Pritchard's great playmaking? Well, Chris Duarte this year is the man. He was a first-team All-Pac-12 member, 18 points per game, 5 boards per game, and a really good defender. He shoots at 43% from three and is doing so with a lot of step backs and contested shots, not only just catching and shooting like he did a year ago. He's done what I'm sure teams told him to do to improve his draft stock. And you're also seeing what a leader he is. You saw against Iowa. He was the one rallying the troops earlier in that game when it was closer, before they started getting all those turnovers. He was hitting big shots to put them into leads. He was hitting tough shots. He also guarded Joe Wieskamp, who's another guy that I think will be drafted this year if he goes to the draft, and is a supremely good shooter. So you saw defensive grit, you saw leadership. One knock on him, though, is he's older. I think he's nearly 24 years old. So that limits potential, but he can certainly fill a role, and I love that possibility. I've got one more player for you guys here, and that is Joel Ayayi. I think he's probably the 4th best college player on Gonzaga, but he's the 3rd best prospect. And I think that is because Drew Timme's an excellent college player. He's just not as appealing as a pro. Joel Ayayi, on the other hand, has the quietest excuse me, I've got the hiccups. Joel Ayayi does the dirty work for Gonzaga. He's probably the quietest prospect on a team that is undefeated right now. Quite frankly, they're flying under the radar almost. And Joel Ayayi is a huge reason why. And I don't think anyone will attribute it to him. What he does is he rebounds the ball at an exceptional rate. He defends their best wing player, and he scores 14 points per game, shoots the ball okay. That is kind of a knock on him, as he's not an elite shooter. But he scores 14 a game and gets 8 rebounds per game as a guard. He's mature. He's played with great players. He knows how to pass. He's awesome in transition. And the thing I love about Joel Ayayi most is he'll have a triple-double for Gonzaga, and the night we'll talk about someone else. And I'm sure scouts notice that, though. To me, I've got a very good comparison that I think will be very appropriate. He's to me what Josh Hart is in the NBA for Gonzaga. And I think he can emulate Josh Hart's role very well. I think Josh Hart might be a slightly better offensive player coming out of college, coming out of Villanova. But I think Josh Hart had that system oriented for him. And in the NBA, Josh Hart's had to transition to be more off ball. Josh Hart played with Jalen Brunson a little bit, but Josh Hart was the man on some of those teams, and he got the ball a lot. Joel Ayayi doesn't get the ball. He'll be used to his role as an off-ball cutter, a defensive stopper, a guard rebounder. He scored 8 rebounds per game from a guard spot in college is ridiculous. Josh Hart's about 7.5 rebounds per game right now as a guard spot in the NBA. He's a good defender, and I'd say Joel Ayayi is probably a better defender than Josh Hart was in college. Long story short, Josh Hart was taken at the end of the first round. I think Joel Ayayi will do the same thing, and would be an awesome pick for a contender who wants a dirty work guard who can defend, who can shoot, who will do anything you ask of him, and will make any good team better and make any bad team better as well. And that's a lot of what you can ask of a prospect is, can you make my team better? And I think the answer for him is a certain yes. So I hope you enjoyed this. This was kind of an off the cuff style recap of what's happened to make the Sweet 16 happen. The Sweet 16 is happening Saturday and Sunday. I couldn't be more excited. I know Scott couldn't be more excited either. And we'll have some previews for you coming up. But I just wanted to give you some analysis of what makes some of these teams contributing in the greatness of madness run. Like what are they doing schematically? What are they doing schematically with certain players? What players make the engines run, and what players on these teams will be first-round draft picks? And I think I nailed it on those ones. There's a few more players that I considered putting in, and maybe some players will continue their awesome runs and make a name of themselves and become first-round picks. But I think all the guys I talked about will be first-round picks, and we can check back on that in a few months, and hopefully some more great basketball is played. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back for another Thulin Takeover Thursday next Thursday. Enjoy.